everybody, welcome back to The Hobby Musician. Today you're joining us in the middle of a mini-series of the most ambitious project we've ever done on this channel. We are currently building 2 guitars completely from scratch, completely with hand tools, and using nothing but salvaged or scavenged wood. Now, if you're just joining us today, don't worry. If you click the link at the top, I've arranged a playlist that has all of the episodes with all of the steps of this project so you can get caught up on past things or just bookmark it for future steps. Today's episode is going to focus primarily on routing. Now, it's going to be a shorter episode because I just want to talk through what some of the realities are when it comes to routing if you're not familiar with it, and even tell you specifically some of the things I've been doing with routing through this entire project. Now, you're going to have to route basically 3 main parts. When you're thinking about building a guitar from scratch, sure, you've got to cut out body shapes, you've got to cut out neck shapes, but there are 3 areas you will have to route, which is just a fancy word for larger cutting out of cavities or voids into blocks of wood or material. The first thing that you're going to have to route out will be where the pickups are essentially going to go. So what I've got here, I brought along the rough template that we made in a previous episode that you can see here. After I made my dimensions, I knew where I was going to end up installing the pickups. But when it came to the shape and the size of these, when I made my template, these were not perfect. These cuts, I used a jigsaw and some hand files, and these are not perfect rectangles, and they're not perfectly, to the dimensions that I needed. So what I ended up doing was I went back to the same software that we used to 3D print our pickup cavities and pickup, materials, and I 3D printed better templates that were accurate. So these are 3D printed templates that are exactly the dimensions for the 5-string bass that we're building, and for the 4-string, you can see they're slightly different sizes. And then these were the guides that I used to trace onto the blank bodies. And you can see in this picture, after I had the center line on, I was able to put and draw the exact placement of where I wanted those cavities. Now, the second thing that I'm going to talk about, no matter what you're doing in terms of routing, if you're going to route larger areas, and I would consider these would fall under the category a larger area of wood that you want to cut out, you're going to want to pre-work or do some preparation for that with forstner bits. So here is an example of a forstner bit. This is, they're designed, they will create essentially flat bottom holes, and you can get them at different dimensions. So this one is a 1 inch, so it will cut a circle that is 1 inch in diameter with a flat bottom. And you want to do the bulk of your work. If you're going to try to cut out even a rectangular cavity like we want, you're going to want to drill through and try to remove as much material as you can with the drill bit, because that's going to save the life and the sharpness on your actual routing bits. So that is a tip, no matter what you're doing. If you're doing these pickup cavities or the neck cavity, the neck slot, you're going to want to use these forstner bits. And as we've done in all of our videos, if you want to check out some of the exact things that we're using in this project, make sure you go down below, and I'll put some Amazon affiliate links that you can see the exact models of things that we use. Well, in this picture, you can see the first thing I did was I took that forstner bit, and I went just inside the traced lines to see as much as I could get of that. Then I came back. Once I had as much possible removed, I came back with the router, and I used just external boards that I clamped onto the body as my straight line guides. And sure, I was able to zip up and finish out those lines. You can see in this picture, once we did that, now we ended up with our rectangular cavities. Okay, the second place that you're going to need to be doing some routing is going to be on the internal workings of the neck. Okay, if you know anything about guitar building, you know that you have to install truss rods, and in our case, we weren't just installing a truss rod, we were installing carbon fiber reinforcement rods on either side of our truss rod. Now these are more channel-based routing things. So unlike what we talked about with the Forstner bit, where you want to like remove lots of material, these channels are only going to be a few millimeters thick, or maybe maximum our truss rod was 1/4 inch. In this case, what I ended up doing was I took some of those same long boards, and I didn't use a Forstner bit to start. I just took a very, very shallow depth. I set the router bit very, very shallow, and using those boards as a guide, I just took an initial pass for the length of the truss rod that I needed. Then I flipped over the router and extended the bit just a touch and took another pass and another pass. And by doing that little by little, you can then cut these very precise troughs and grooves to whatever dimensions you needed. And then I made sure I was using the correct dimension bit to get the channel for the truss rod and then the channels for the support carbon fiber rods. Now the third and the final big area that you're going to be needing to do some routing work is with that neck pocket. Now you can see again, just on this template, it's not cut out of the template, but I know what the dimensions are. When I was making my plans and drawing out everything I was going to need for the build, I knew that I was going to need to cut a neck pocket, but the neck pocket can't go all the way through. So once again, we are in a situation where we need to remove some of the material, but not all of the material, which is a job for the router. Just like we described with using straight edges, I used my neck templates and I traced on exactly where the neck pocket needed to go, and then I clamped on my straight edge boards as a guide, and using measurements. I just use a tape measure. I measured down how far the neck needed to go, and then I measured on the body how far that needed to be, and using our Forstner bit, we're back to using these. The neck pocket is a bigger area, larger area, so I started out with my Forstner bit to remove most of that material, and once I had it, I clamped on my straight boards like I just mentioned, used the router to zip off the last few edges of that. And after that, that really is the bulk of what I would consider routing out the cavities. Now we're not talking about the routing of edges. You can use, routers are fantastic tools to zip around the edges. If you use templates like these and trim, flush trim bits on your router, you can cut out the shape of a body and then zip those edges and make them nice and smooth. But this video, I just wanted to focus on how you can prepare and route out the larger areas, more of the internal workings of a guitar build like this. So with that, I hope you got something out of this episode and maybe can use some of this in your own project. Thank you for watching, and as always, play on, my friends, play on.